Hi everyone. So in this lab, what we're going to do is we're going to create a network address translation, and the acronym for that is NAT, N-A-T, NAT Gateway, for an EC2 instance in a private subnet. And I want to do a couple of things. I want to go over this diagram first and kind of give you an overview of what we're going to do. And before I get started, I just want to make sure I'm recording, and I am. I've done that before. I've recorded videos. I thought I recorded videos. I get all the way through the end and realize I didn't hit the record button. Had to do it over again. Probably won't be the first and wouldn't be the last. But anyway, so what you see in this diagram, what you see in black is going to be the virtual private cloud that we create, which is our network infrastructure in the cloud. And that network infrastructure is going to have a Class B address of 172.16.0.0/16. And from there, we're going to create within that virtual private cloud an availability zone. And an availability zone, again, in the Microsoft network, in the Amazon network, represents a data center within that region. And so when we create these labs on the Learner Lab module, they're all designed to be created in the Northern Virginia U.S. East region. And so within that U.S. East region, there's actually an availability zone A, which would be U.S. East 1A, and there's also a U.S. East 1B, which we could use that to create a second availability zone. But for the purposes of this lab, we're going to create one availability zone. So as you see, what we'll do is we'll set up a public subnet and we'll place an EC2 instance in it. And what you need to remember when you put an EC2 instance in a public subnet, that EC2 instance is going to have a it's going to have a private IP address for the virtual private cloud, but it's also going to have a public IP address. And if it has a public IP address, what you need to remember by looking at the diagram is all it needs is an internet gateway to get out to the internet, because a public IP is already assigned to the EC2 instance. And we'll test that. We'll set it up. We'll go to the EC2 instance and we can make sure that we can reach the internet, specifically the google.com web servers. Okay? Now, what do you do when you place an instance in a private subnet? If you place an instance in a private subnet, it has a private IP address, 172.16, in this case, 2 dot something. And again, with private IP addresses, they are not routable to the internet. You can't have a private IP address go out to the internet and go out to google.com, for example. You need a NAT gateway. And a NAT gateway is a device or a virtual device in the cloud that maintains a permanent, static, never changing public IP. We call it an elastic IP address, or EIP. And once that EIP is attached to the NAT gateway will convert a private IP into its public IP before it sends it to the internet gateway and goes out to the internet, right? So you need an intermediary, right? Unlike the public subnet, the private subnet needs an intermediary, and that is called the NAT gateway. And so we'll set up the NAT gateway. We'll set up the private subnets, and we'll go ahead and test connectivity out to the google.com web servers. Okay? But we'll also do some other things as well. We got to modify the route tables because, for example, for the public subnet, we'll have to create a route that says if we're going to go out to the internet, which is represented by 0.0.0.0/0, then any traffic destined to the internet is to be sent to the internet gateway. And for the private subnet, we'll have to create a route that says any address destined for the internet, we send it to the NAT gateway. And then the NAT gateway sends it to the internet gateway, and then it goes out to the internet. Okay? So in order to test the private subnet, right, from our computer, since it has a private IP, we can't access it directly from our home laptops, for example. So what we have to do is kind of do a hop. And so, for example, we'll use Secure Shell, right, to log in to the Amazon EC2 instance. And once we're logged in, we'll go ahead and test our internet connectivity. Okay. Again, we can't do that with the private subnet. So what we have to do is log into the public subnet, the Amazon EC2, and since the Amazon EC2 has a private IP address, and there's a default route for anything beginning with 172.16 is local, meaning that the Amazon EC2 and the public subnet can access the Amazon EC2 and the private subnet. So we'll hop from here and we'll SSH into here. Now there's two utilities we'll need to do that. And one of them is called PUTTY and the other one's called Pageant. Okay, and so what you'll do is, in fact, I recommend you do this before we start with the lab, is go to this link right here. I'll copy it. And if you open up a new tab and you just paste, now I already have it on my computer, but I'll show you what to do. You'll get this page and you'll scroll down to alternative binary files and you'll select 64-bit x86, and this is for a Microsoft machine, and you'll click putty.exe, and again, you'll just be, that exe will be loaded onto your workstation or laptop at home. And then you'll go to scroll down a little bit and you'll select 64-bit x86 Pageant exe, click on it and download it as well. And you could search, after you download them, there's a couple things you could do. If it's in your download folders, you could create a desktop shortcut to it. And I've got two of them. That's what the PUTTY icon looks like. And that's what the Pageant icon looks like. Okay. You can also key it in the search. You could type PUTTY, right? And you can right click on it and you could pin it to the taskbar. I already have it, so it says unpin. Okay. And then you could do the same thing for Pageant. You could type PAGEANT and kind of do the same thing. And you could pin it to the taskbar. Okay. I already have it open and it's on my taskbar. And so what we'll do is we will go ahead and we'll just get started with the lab. And if I pull up the Word document again, oh, that ain't it. That's my email. Hang on. I always get those two icons confused. Okay. But again, I made a chart of what you should download. Okay. And so what I just showed you is where you should go to here on the Word document. And again, these are what the icons look like. And then these are the lab steps, okay? They're not actually step by step labs, but they're more generalized. But if you follow the video, and for example, if you go through this lab one time with the video, and if you were to do it again, you could do it just by doing the lab steps, okay? So we'll go ahead and get started. Our first task is we're going to create a VPC, and it's going to be our first name -VPC, and this is going to be the parent IP subnet that we're going to assign to it. Okay, so I've already launched the Academy Learner Lab. I started the lab, and if you need to pause the video to go into the Academy Learner Lab and hit start, and then once you get the AWS green light, you can start the video again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on AWS. And the first thing we're going to do is going to create a VPC. Now you could type it in. You could type VPC, and you can click on it. And notice it gives you one VPC, right? It's a default VPC, but we're going to create our own. And after we create our own, we'll go back and we'll delete this VPC, okay? And there's a reason for that, right? Because there's going to be times throughout the lab when you're going to select the VPC, right? And there's two choices. There's the default one and the one you created. And we don't want you accidentally clicking on the wrong VPC. So In the upper right, select Create VPC, and you're going to give it a name. Again, first name dash VPC, okay? And the IPv4 seeder block is going to be 172.16.0.0/16, okay? As far as Tennessee, we want to leave it as default, okay? When you choose dedicated, the prices go up. Okay, so default basically means how a cloud environment works. You share hard drive space on a physical server in a data center with other tenants, right? Sort of like leasing an apartment versus if you select dedicated, it'd be like a condominium, right? You'd be buying like an apartment and you would have purchased it and paid for it. Now that costs more, right, than paying for it, paying an apartment rent every month, and then maybe leaving after a couple of years. So we're going to leave the Tennessee to the default, and we're going to select Create VPC. Okay, and then we're going to go back to your VPCs on the left, and we're going to delete that default VPC by putting a check mark on it. Go into Actions and select Delete VPC. And we're going to acknowledge, and we have to type in delete default VPC and hit delete. Okay, that way there'll be no mistakes. Okay, so that's step one. Okay, and you can see, you can verify the IPv4 seeder information from the screen right here. Pull up the Word document, and we'll go to our second step. And we're going to create a public subnet. We're going to name it public. And it's going to have a subnetted address of 172.16.1.0/24. Okay. So we go to subnets. And first we'll create a subnet. Let me see if these are gone now. I should have deleted them. There they go. Okay. I hit that refresh here to get rid of the subnets that were deleted. We're going to select Create Subnet. You're going to select your VPC. Again, there's only one choice now, right? So it reduces error or potential error. And we're going to name it public, right? Because you remember the diagram, okay? You know, if you remember the diagram, let me pull that up real quick. Right? Here's your public subnet right here, and we'll place an EC2 instance in it. Okay, so availability zone, we're going to choose the US East 1A region. Okay, so when you're using the Academy Learner Lab, you got to remember you have some limitations. It's like a sandbox for us to create whatever labs we want to create, but everything's got to be done in the North Virginia region or the US West 2 region. Okay, the IPv4 seeder block of the VPC is already listed. And under IPv4 subnet, we're going to type 172.16.1.0/24. Okay. And we're going to create that subnet. Okay. So you have the public subnet here created. Moving along to step 3, we're going to create our internet gateway. Okay. So when you create an internet gateway, one of the things you should make sure that you do is after you create it, you attach it to the VPC. Okay, so I'll make a note here because I'm going to put these notes in the course room. I got to enable editing. Just put a comment in here. Remember to attach to VPC. Okay, so we'll create an internet gateway. We'll go to the internet gateways here on the left. And there's a default one, okay? We're going to get rid of it, but we'll create an internet gateway. And again, it'll be called John-IGW, okay? And we'll select Create, right? And then what we're going to do is attach it to our VPC. So in that green button, select Attach to VPC and select John VPC, okay? Or your first name VPC. And click Attach. Okay, so that has to be done, right? So under Internet Gateways, there's 2. We should now be able to get rid of this one, the one at the top. Go to Actions and and we'll detach it. Okay, it should be already gone. There it is. It was already gone. I just didn't hit refresh. Okay, so we got one internet gateway, and we'll go to our instructions. We got to create a public route table because we have to say, like, and I'll show you the route table. There's a default route in there that allows us to communicate with any object within our VPC. It's called a local route. That's created for us. So we don't have to worry about being able to communicate with any device in our VPC via the private IP. Okay, but we need to create a public route table that says any address going out to the internet needs to be sent to the internet gateway. Okay, and so it says create a public route table. The name of it will be public RT. We'll add the subnet association for the subnet we just created, 1.0. Did I name it 2.0? No, I named it 1.0. Okay. All right, so you're going to click on route tables on the left. Okay. And there's two existing route tables. Let me see if they're gone as well. Okay, there's just one. Okay, we'll create a route table. Oh, this should already be it. Yeah, this is the route table that's attached to our VPC. So they created a route table for us already. Okay, I'll show you how to give it a name. Okay, and notice for the existing route, there's a destination that says, basically what this means is anything beginning with 172.16 is a local route, and you have connectivity to any private IP in the virtual private cloud. In your virtual private cloud, there's a local route for it. So you can communicate with devices in your VPC that have a private IP. Okay, we'll make the subnet association, and we'll edit the subnet association because there's none yet. And we'll select the public subnet, and we'll select Save Associations. Okay, so you have that subnet association there, right? Go back to the Routes tab and select Edit Routes. And we're going to add a route. Notice we got that local route in there. We'll select Add Route. And the destination will be any IP address. And who do we send it to? Click on Internet Gateway, and for IGW, select your first name IGW, and select Save Changes. Okay, now if we go back to route tables on the left, you can give it a name. See this little pencil? I put my hover over with my mouse, click on the pencil, and you can name it public capital R, capital T, stands for route table. Okay? By default, the name, they don't ask you to give the name of a route table. You got to go in there and create a name yourself. You don't have to create a name, but if you have many, many route tables, then it gets kind of confusing, right? To know which one's which. You got to kind of click on them. Okay, so this makes it a little bit simpler. All right, so that should be step 4. Okay, now we're going to create a security group. Okay, so a security group is like an access list for objects within our VPC. So for the purposes of this lab, we're going to create an open access list that allows any inbound or outbound IP address. Okay, in future labs, we'll go in there and we'll create more profound security groups and more profound access lists that stipulate only certain types of traffic can go out and go in to objects within your VPC. Okay, and so the security group we're going to create is going to be used for both EC2 instances and the public and private subnets. The security group will allow all IP traffic, outbound and inbound access. So we'll go ahead and do step 5. Okay, so scroll down a little bit and go to security groups. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and create our own. We're going to create a security group. and you're going to name it first name dash SG. And for description, we're going to type allow all inbound and outbound traffic. Descriptions are pretty good because it kind of explains to you the purpose of the security group. And then you're going to select your VPC. Okay. So outbound rules by default, they're allowing all traffic to go out. Okay. We're going to add a rule for an inbound rule that says the same thing for all traffic. Source will be any IPv4 address is allowed in. All traffic's allowed in, all traffic's allowed out. And then we're going to select create security group. Okay? So we have our security group created. Moving along. That was step 5. What we're going to do is create an EC2 instance in the public subnet. We're going to name it Linux 1. You're going to create a key pair, and it's simply going to be your first name. And we're going to make sure the EC2 is in our VPC and is also within the public subnet. It's 172.16.1.0. Okay? So in the search up top, we type EC2. And we're going to select Launch Instance. Click the orange button. And per the instructions, we're going to name it Linux 1. It's going to be a Linux server. Okay, make sure it's selected for Amazon Linux. Leave the default AMI machine image as is, 2023. It's free tier eligible. Okay, make sure you have T2 micro, free tier eligible. Okay, and now we're going to create a key pair. And you're going to type your name. Okay, and you want to select PPK. Okay, for Windows machines. If you have a Mac, then it would be PEM. So we're going to key in PPK, and we're going to select create key pair. Okay, and what that should have done is that key pair should be downloaded to your downloads folder. Okay, and you can see mine. I have one right here. Okay. So we have the key pair. We're going to click Edit for Network Settings. Make sure it's in our VPC, John VPC. Make sure it's in the public subnet. It says public in 172.16.1.0. We want to enable an IP address, a public IP address to be assigned to it. Okay. The difference between assigning an IP address to an EC2 instance in a public subnet and an IP address to a NAT Gateway is on the NAT Gateway, that public IP is an elastic IP. It's more like a permanent IP that's not going to change. And an auto-assigned public IP is a public IP that theoretically, it's almost like a DHCP IP address that's auto-assigned, right? 99% of the time it remains the same, okay, each and every day. But there are times where that public IP could change. But we want to enable auto-assigned public IP, and it's actually cheaper than an elastic IP. We want to select an existing security group. We're going to select the security group we just created with your first name, not the default, but the one with your first name. Okay. We're going to scroll down, and that should be it. And we're going to select Launch Instance. Okay. And up at the top here, right, click on Instances. And it's going to take a minute or two for the status checks to pass, okay? So while we're waiting on those status checks, I'll show you else what we're going to do. So let me take you back to the diagram. So what we've done is we created our virtual private cloud in black, okay? And we have a VPC, which is 172.16.0.0. That was our first step. Our second step was to create the public subnet and create an internet gateway, attach the internet gateway to the VPC, and create a route table for the public subnet saying any address destined for the internet is to be sent to the Internet Gateway. Okay, and then we just created a Linux-based EC2 instance in the public subnet, and we're waiting for it to initialize. So that's where we're at so far. Okay, so you can hit refresh, and it's still initializing. So I'll pause the video, and we'll wait for those status checks to pass. Okay, so I had to wait about 2 minutes, about, give or take, right, for this two checks to pass. Okay, so once you've done that, you have the EC2 instance created, right? So if we look at our instructions, okay, we're going to access the EC2 from PUTTY using the public IP address from the EC2 instance. We'll copy the public IP, we'll go to PUTTY, we'll paste in the public IP, and we'll attach the key name, okay, and that's been downloaded to our downloads folder. Okay, so how do you get the public IP? Just click on the instance ID, okay, and here you'll see public IP, and you'll see like two pieces of paper, right? Just click on that. That will copy the public IP, not the private, right? We can't access private IPs from the internet. Copy the public IP, and then we'll open up PUTTY, and under host name and IP address, just paste in the public IP. Okay? One more thing we need to do. We need to click the plus sign next to SSH here at the bottom, and we need to click the plus sign next to authentication, and click on credentials, and where it says private key file for authentication, click browse, and double click on your key name and select open. And then you're going to select accept. And to log in, you're going to type EC2-user. That's the default username for an Amazon EC2 instance. So Amazon EC2 instances come with default usernames called EC2 user, and there's no password required to log in. You would have to set one up, right, if this was going to be an actual server that you were going to use on your network. Okay, so with that said, we're logged into the EC2 instance. Now what we want to do is test internet connectivity through our internet gateway. And so what we want to do is like a DNS lookup, right? If you type the command wget space www. And we'll type Facebook or google.com. It don't make a difference which one. You just need to get the IP address from it. So if I type google.com, hit enter, okay, notice this IP address right here, right? 172.253.122.105. I'm going to ping it. We're going to type ping 172.253.122.105, hit enter, and notice you're getting successful echo replies back. Okay, now if the instructions say Facebook, you would do the same thing, wget facebook.com or try that again, www.facebook.com. Okay, let's get it. Here it is. It's at the very top, 157.240. See, I can actually try to copy that if it lets me. If not, I'll just, yeah, it did copy it for me. But I got to go back and type ping. I got to type ping, hit the space bar, hit enter. Okay, so now you're pinging the facebook.com web server. And to cancel it, it's a Control-C. Okay, now we're done testing connectivity from the public EC2 instance to the internet. So you could type exit here. We can just close this secure shell session and we can exit out. Okay, so if we go back to our lab instructions, okay, we've done step 8. Okay, now what we're going to do is set up the private subnet, and we're going to create a NAT gateway. When you create the NAT gateway, it has to be in the public subnet. Okay, Even though it's providing services for private IP addresses for instances in a private subnet, the NAT gateway itself has to be in a public subnet. Okay? And then we'll assign that elastic IP to it. Okay, so the first step is to create the private subnet. Okay, so we go to, I have to go back to VPCs. So I type VPC into search, click on it, and I'm going to click on subnet, and we're going to create a private subnet. We're going to select the VPC, John VPC. The subnet name is going to be private. It's going to be in the same availability zone, US East 1A, as the public subnet. And the IPv4 seeder block is going to be 172.16.2.0/24. Okay, and then we're going to select create subnet. Okay, so the private subnet's created. Okay, next step on our lab instructions again, step 10, we're going to create the NAT gateway, and we're going to give it the first name -NAT. We got to wait till it's available, so I may have to pause the video. And then we'll assign an elastic IP to the NAT gateway. Okay? So if we scroll down here to NAT gateways, click on it, select create NAT gateway, and it's going to be John-NAT. John-NAT. Select the subnet. Again, the NAT gateway has to be in the public subnet. Okay? The connectivity type is public. Okay? You're going to allocate the elastic IP, which is that permanent address, and then you're going to select create the NAT gateway. Okay. So if you go to NAT gateways here at the top, you could see your NAT gateway, the state is pending, and it's going to take, might only take a minute. So I'm not going to pause the video here. Let's just wait. Well, you know what? I'll pause the video because it may take another minute or two. And then when it's available, I'll restart it. Okay, so I'm pausing the video now. Okay, so that took about a minute and a half or 2 minutes. I didn't count. Okay, but the status became available. Okay, so now that that's available, let's go to our next step. Okay, we've done step 10. We're going to create a private route table and add the subnet association, which is that anything in the private subnet, and add the route to the internet, anything to the internet using the NAT gateway. Okay, so if we go to route tables, and if we click on create route table, we're going to name it private RT. Get my fingers to work. Private RT, select your VPC, and we're going to create the route table. Okay, so you notice by default, again, you have a local route for both the public and private route table, which means the EC2 instance in the public subnet and the EC2 instance in the private subnet can communicate with each other based on their private IP addresses because there's a local route, again, to anything in that VPC. And I think I've repeated it once or twice. Okay? And now we're going to make the subnet association, and we're going to click edit, and we're going to add the private subnet. Make sure it's private and click save. Okay? And now we're going to edit the route. Again, because it's a private subnet with only a private IP, there's no public IP address will be assigned in the EC2 instance. It's not routable to the internet, and the only way it's routable to the internet is through a NAT gateway. We're going to add a route, and we're going to select the quad 0 again. And instead of internet gateway, this time we're going to select NAT gateway. Click in the NAT box, let's try that again, and select your NAT gateway. And select Save Changes. Okay? So if we go back to route tables, okay, you got both a public route and a private route. All right? So we'll go to our next step. Okay, we're on step 12 now. We're going to create an EC2 in the private subnet. Its name will be Linux 2. We're going to use the same key pair that we created with the EC2 instance in the public subnet. And make sure your EC2 instance is in your VPC and in the private subnet. Okay? Next step. Let's create an EC2 in the private subnet. So we'll type EC2. Notice we got one instance is running already, right? We got that Linux 1. We're going to select launch instances. We're going to give it the name Linux 2. Leave Amazon Linux as is. And make sure you leave the image to the default. Oh, hang on, Control Z. I don't know what I did there with my mouse. Okay, and then the instance type is going to be T2 micro. Okay, we're going to select an existing key pair. Click the drop down arrow and select the key pair with your name on it, John. Okay, in my case it's John. Okay, now you're going to go to network settings and you click edit. And you want to make sure that this EC2 instance is in your VPC and in your private subnet. Make sure it reads private here and that the seeder is 172.16.2.0. It's not going to have a public IP, so we're going to leave this as disabled. And we're going to select an existing security group. And we're going to select first name, John's security group. Okay? And that should do it, and then we'll launch the instance. Okay, so we'll go to instances. And again, we got to wait for the status checks on the instance, Linux 2 instance in the private subnet for the checks to pass, okay? And once that's done, we are going to repeat the process. We're going to add a couple of things onto PUTTY. We're going to repeat the process, but we're also going to use Pageant to SSH into the EC2 instance in the public subnet. And then once we're logged into the EC2 instance in the public subnet, we'll use an SSH command to log into the EC2 instance in the private subnet. So we're kind of like hopping from one instance to the other, okay? And so you'll see here, well, this will take us to step 13, right? After the instance checks have passed, copy the private IP and paste it into a notepad or Word document. You can paste it onto these instructions if you want. That's what it, I'm just giving an example what the IP address should look like. That's not the actual IP address. Okay? So let me hit refresh. And we're still waiting for the checks to pass. I'll pause the video while we're waiting for the checks to pass. Okay, so I had to wait like another 2-3 minutes this time for the checks to pass, so you should be the same thing. I just want to add, like, you can always like edit your names of your EC2 instances. So for Linux 2, and if you want things to make sense to you, forget which one is the public instance and which one's the private, you can always click this pencil mark, and under Linux 2 you could type private and then click the check mark, right? And then click the pencil for Linux 1 dash public. You don't have to do it. I'm just showing you how to do it. But I encourage you to go through these labs when you name things. Doesn't have to be the exact name. Like when you're given an instance a name or a database name, doesn't have to be the exact name in the lab. You can use a name that makes sense to you. Just remember when I make, or another instructor who's doing the video makes reference to that instance, that you know which one's which, okay? So I'm just pointing that out to you, okay? So we've got the EC2s all done. And what we're going to do is, again, following the instructions, we are going to copy the private IP of Linux 2. Let me add that on there. And paste it into a notepad or Word document. So how do we get the public IP? Click on Linux 2, click on the instance ID, okay? There's no public IP address this time, if you notice. So there's a private IP address up here in the upper right, and click on the paper again. We'll copy that. And let me pull up a notepad here, because we don't want to forget the name of it. We're going to have to hop onto it from the instance in the public subnet. So let me just click a new tab here. Copy and paste that in there. Okay, and I'll minimize my notepad. I'll need it later. We'll need it later. Okay, so we've done that. So 14, okay, we're going to go back to the public instance, and we're going to copy the public IP again. Not copy the public IP. I meant public IP address. And we're gonna go to the public instance, copy the public IP. We're gonna PUTTY in again. We're gonna add a step to allow forwarding, and we're gonna use Pageant along with it. Add the key to Pageant. Okay. Okay. Let me just leave this the way it was. Okay. And I'll show you how to do it. Okay. So for step 14, okay, let's get our instances. There they are. Click on Linux 1, the Linux ID. I'm going to copy the public IPv4 address. Okay. Now, first step I'm going to do is for Pageant. I'm going to go to search here. I'm going to click on the Pageant app. And it should be under my hidden icons as well. It's got a hat on it. If I right click, and I'm going to select Add Key. Okay. And I'm going to select the John key. Okay, it's already running, so I may have to remove the key. There may be an existing key on here. So what you want to do is right click, and if there's any keys, select Remove All Keys. Okay. Then go back to Pageant, right click and select Add Key. Select John, select Open. Okay, so that completes Pageant. Now we'll go back to PUTTY. We'll paste in the public IP. Okay, we're getting there. And we'll go to +on SSH, +on authentication, +on the credentials. But under authentication here, see, look what I've highlighted here. Under authentication, you want to put a check mark on allow agent forwarding. Okay, so that's what Pageant allows you to do in conjunction with PUTTY. Okay, click on credentials right underneath it. Click browse and add the same key that you used for Pageant and select open. Okay, we're going to log in as EC2-user and hit enter. Okay. And now we're logged in to the EC2, the public EC2. It also happens to have a private IP. Look at it's telling you what the IP address is, 172.16.1.179. Okay, I don't know what I did there. Okay, but if you look here, 172.16.1.179, right? That's the private IP address of the public server. And here's its public IP. So you have the private and public IP. Okay. Now what we're going to do is hop on over to the EC2 instance in the private subnet. Okay. And to do that, this is where we bring up our notepad document again. We're going to copy that IP. This is the private IP address for the private instance. We're going to copy it. We're going to type the command SSH space, hit the space bar, -L without any spaces. Type the username, EC2-user. Hit the space bar, and then left click with your mouse. Use the right mouse button and paste it in. And is it in there twice? Yeah, for some reason I had it in there twice. Okay, but that's what the command should look like. Okay, and then you're going to hit enter, and you're going to type yes and hit enter, and now you're logged into the private instance, and you could tell by the private IP address 172.16.2.52, right, which is the private IP of the instance in the private subnet. Now, this instance is using the NAT Gateway for internet access, right? So it goes from the private EC2 to the NAT Gateway, gets converted to a public IP that's permanent. It's the elastic IP through the internet gateway out to the internet, and it comes back in the same fashion. Okay? So if you type the same command, wget www.google or facebook.com, you do them both like we did last time. Okay? You'll get the IP address of the Google web server. You can ping it, ping 142.251.16.106, and hit enter, and you're getting successful echo replies. Okay, and Control C to stop it. You could type exit to log out of the private instance. You're back to the public instance now, and you can type exit again to log out the public instance. Okay, so that completes the lab steps. Okay, so we got the lab completed. What I want you to do, right, just to make sure you don't incur any charges, is we're going to delete the NAT Gateway, release the elastic IP address, end the lab, and click reset. And I'll show you how to do that real quick. Okay, so what you want to do is go to your, I think I go back to VPC. You got to type VPC in here, and go back to the NAT Gateway, click on it, and under Actions, select Delete NAT Gateway, and type delete to confirm. And it's deleting. Okay. When it's deleted, then what you want to do is go to the elastic IP, and you want to release that. Okay, because that's something you would be charged for. Go to Actions and select Release Elastic IP. Okay, it's not letting me yet because the NAT Gateway hasn't been deleted yet. So that is still deleting. Okay, so I'll pull up the diagram one more time and real quickly explain what we did while waiting for it to be deleted, right? So as you see in the second step, when we create the private subnet, we added a second EC2 instance for it. And you can see the subnetted address for the private subnet. But we went through a NAT Gateway. Look at the arrow, the traffic flow. We go through the NAT Gateway, right? Because that private IP gets converted into a public IP, the elastic IP. Then it goes out to the internet gateway. Then it goes out to the internet. Whereas the EC2 instance in the public subnet has both a public and private IP and only needs the internet gateway for internet access. And these two can both communicate with each other using their local private IP address, because there's a local route that was automatically created for us for that. Okay, now let me see if that NAT gateway is deleted. Okay, it's deleted. So I can go to the elastic IP here on the left, click on it, and I can type release. Okay, following account because they are associated. Remove the association. Disassociate. Well, you know what? There's another way to do this, okay? You've got the NAT Gateway deleted, so what we want to do from here is we want to log out of the lab, click Sign Out, and go back to your lab. You click End Lab, select Yes, and select Reset, and that will delete it, and select Yes. Okay, so that concludes the lab. I hope you enjoyed it, and this ends the video.